Hi, I'm Justin Smith, and you're on the record. Our guest today is Kris Ward, the Director of Business Development for FOCUS Broadband. Kris, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Justin, for this opportunity.
So today we're going to talk rural broadband, high-speed internet, and I want to start out kind of on a personal perspective, because I can't think about high-speed internet or rural broadband without thinking of a day in April of 2000. I was in high school, and I had the opportunity to cover the President of the United States coming to Columbus County. And that was a big deal for me in terms of my professional career. And as you might imagine, I was kind of hanging on every word, right? And Whiteville and Columbus County, we were the backdrop for a conversation about rural broadband. And so I was looking back through our archives here at the News Reporter yesterday to prepare for this interview. And the News Reporter ran a transcript of President Bill Clinton's speech, every word he said. And I want to read a part of it, okay? Because he was talking about rural areas falling behind urban areas. And so he said, but we can catch up if, for the first time in our history, we can collapse time and distance so that your children have access to every bit of information any children in the richest places in the world have, so that your businesses have access to every potential customer and supplier any place in the world, so that you have access to anything you'd ever need to know and learn as soon and as well as anyone else does. Have we reached that point?
It's interesting you mentioned that, because when we first started coming in Columbus County, I went back and read that and used that quite a few times, because I think that was the initial spotlight from at least the federal government, saying there's areas that are being left behind without high-speed internet. I'm a little bit older than you, so my wife and Judge Barbecue were involved with that, so we had pictures and got to speak with the president, but everybody was excited. But there was no money behind the speech. And the money really came in 2008, 2010, after the recession in 2008 and the drop with the mortgages and everything else. So since that time, money's become available from the federal side, and then states, North Carolina started the GREAT grant back in 2018, I believe. They've started putting more money toward that. But I think until recently, until COVID, that's not been the case, because there's been a lot of lip service about people not having internet. And honestly, it's still a capital society, so if you can't make money doing something and there's no incentive provided by the government to push those services, there's just nobody that's going to do that. So it was grant funding and those things that brought us into Columbus County. But I think now, if you look at Columbus County, because I've even said this going back to 2010, we have the best technology available in Columbus County. It rivals whatever there's in Raleigh, Charlotte, Wilmington. Columbus County residents have access to gigabit, multiple gigabit, up to 5 gigabits now for residential customers. You know, we're no longer behind the 8 ball when it comes to internet in Columbus County.
But what I'm hearing you say is it took a certain amount of government intervention and involvement, right, to be able to essentially partner with an organization like FOCUS and make it worth your while.
Yeah. When we started over 70 years ago as an organization, the only reason why we came to be because nobody wanted to serve telephone back then, obviously, but nobody wanted to serve rural areas. AT&T, the company that, or there's now AT&T, came out of Wilmington into the Leland area and a little bit into Southport, but they would not serve 75% of Brunswick County. So just like Brunswick Electric, we borrowed money from the REA and started a phone company. Well, since that time, our areas have become more desirable because Brunswick County is now the fastest growing county in the state percentage-wise, and then you have all this growth into Columbus County. But that's just recent. But when you look at what we've been able to do as a cooperative, that's really our mission, is to serve those that are left behind, unserved. And there's a lot of federal programs that help support us to do that. But money was never really available until we had a recession, and we had some things through the Obama administration. And then the biggest pusher, or the biggest the biggest things that's happened since then, which was the worst thing to happen since then, but COVID really set loose money that now we feel confident that none of the counties that we're actually working in will have an internet issue with the billions of dollars that's been made available since COVID. So COVID put a spotlight once again on Columbus County, because our residents, especially in the western and in the eastern end of the county, when kids go home and can't go to school, but you're supposed to still be learning and you have no internet, you know, those people got left behind. People could not work from home. People couldn't go to school. So the money's out there, programs are out there, and just like everything, government programs take longer than most people think they should because there's a lot of red tape. But, you know, since 2010, there's been over $50 million investment in Columbus County, and that's just through FOCUS Broadband to alleviate the internet issue. And we're not putting in outdated network copper phone lines or coax cable lines. We're putting in fiber optics. So yeah, it's a good thing for everybody.
You were talking about COVID and how a lot of the education that happened at that time was online. And I remember my daughter was in primary school at that time, and she was learning online from home in the den. And I saw her doing jumping jacks because they were doing online PE. And I thought, what a crazy world we're in, you know? I mean, on the one hand, though, it was amazing that that technology existed, you know, to at least be able to provide that level of instruction and just structure for those kids.
Yeah, it's a little surreal. My children were still in high school and matriculating into college in 2020 when things happened. They went and attended West Columbus High School at the time. There was a number of their friends, classmates that came to our house, because we have fiber optic internet where we live through FOCUS, came to our house to be able to do their classwork. A lot of kids, you know, phone service, cell service is iffy, even though it's good when it's good, but a lot of kids just couldn't do what they needed to do with just a cell phone in their hands. So, you know, and since that time, Zoom meetings and everything else, businesses now no longer have many face-to-face meetings. I mean, about anything you want to do in the business communities now can all be done over Zoom or some other type of online meeting. So the technology and the ability to do those things has helped us. And, you know, we fell behind quite a bit in education in rural areas, but I think now with the fact that those kids are living in a place where they have high-speed access and they're back in school has made a difference in catching up at least.
So you mentioned some numbers earlier. I want to read something that your office sent. So since 2010, FOCUS Broadband has secured more than $31 million in federal and state funding to bring fiber optic broadband to over 10,000 addresses in Columbus County. In addition to the grant funding, FOCUS has invested approximately $15 million of its own resources to support broadband expansion in the county. So that's probably a point that y'all want to underscore, right? I mean, we get news releases and we publish stories about these grants that FOCUS receives, but there's also money that the company itself is putting out, right?
In every one of those grants, there was some type of contribution factor, 25%, 50%. No grant programs, or very few, are 100%, no match included. And then the fact that a lot of that work, Justin, started around COVID, and then what we know happened with inflation and with the supply chain, every one of those projects had a dollar amount stamped on them when the government approved them. That almost doubled in many cases by the time that project was done. In some cases, we were able to get federal government to get additional funding and the state government, but in most cases, it came out of our pocket as far as the company putting money up. And then there's areas around Whiteville and some other business areas around Lake Waccamaw and stuff that we built with our own expense to, you know, connect some of those rural areas, but also go into businesses like Boys and Girls Home and the county and the city of Whiteville and those places, and the town of Saragordo, to give those folks better access, at least at those businesses. So
this has probably died down, but I remember initially it seemed like there were some residents who were saying, man, well, why are they putting in broadband over in Nakina or over in Regalwood, and why not over here where I live? Did you have to experience a lot of that? And how did y'all choose where to start?
Well, it's just like anything else. If we build fiber optic network, it has to connect back to us, our head end, to go out to the world. So when we started the project in Nakina in 2010 in that area, we were right at the county line, so we were able to connect to our fiber optics. And by jumping off into Columbus County in that area, we were able to then connect, and you have to go in areas where the grants say that these addresses are eligible. And I will tell you, in the last 5 years, there's places where we built 5 years ago that across the road we could not serve because it was considered served, and now the broadband definitions and the grant applications have changed. So now we can go back and serve those other folks with grants. But doing what we've done, you have to build it where it interconnects. So we go to the areas where we can get the largest amount of customers, largest amount of potential customers with the largest grants, because what you have to understand, if you send a grant to the federal government or to Raleigh, and it's a $20 million or a $15 million grant, local politicians, regional politicians, national politicians really get behind those big numbers. If you send something in for $2,000 or $3,000, you're never going to win a grant. So you have to cover the biggest areas first, and then you have your network that's pushed out even further so you can interconnect. And many of the areas, especially in eastern Columbus County and some areas that we've done recently, were not even eligible for grants until recently because the way they changed grants with addresses. Now they do it at an address level. We used to do it at a census block level. So if one house had internet service in a census block, and in the country that could be multiple square miles, everybody was considered served. And the companies that served those customers would put information out that may not be entirely accurate, so nobody could come in and use grant funds. So every bit of the dollars we applied for, we did in a way so we can continue to engineer a contiguous network, which now extends all the way into Hoke County through Robinson and Scotland and Columbus. So we did hear a lot about I want it now or I want it next, but you have to build that based on what you think you can win at a grant level and then what you need to do at an engineering level to make it make sense.
So this may be hard to answer, but why was it FOCUS Broadband that actually did this at scale? Because there were other and still are other internet players, but it seems like you guys are the ones who really went after those state and federal funds.
Well, going back to 2010, anytime you deal with the federal government through the United States Department of Agriculture, there's a lot of hoops you got to jump through. I think our competitors in those areas didn't feel like it was beneficial to do that for those funds. They're also for-profit companies, so they're going to make a bigger splash if they spend $10 million in Raleigh versus $10 million in Columbus County. Every grant we've applied for, any telecommunications or internet provider in the state of North Carolina could apply for. Now, some of those folks that have been in Columbus County for decades are now applying and receiving grants. So that's a good thing for other people because there's a lot of areas that we call donut holes that may be surrounded by a spectrum or a bright speed. So they're really the only company that can go in and serve them because you're not going to get a grant to build across areas they already serve. So, now you're starting to see a lot more folks get into the grant writing process. But, I don't want to sound like I'm bragging, and I was not a big part in this, but we batted 1,000 when we applied for grants in Columbus County, and that is unheard of. And that speaks directly to the county's leadership, the commissioners and managers at those times, and then our local representatives like Brendan Jones and Danny Britt, and even Carson Smith out of Pender County. Those folks really got behind and pushed, and then David Rouser at the federal level, and even our state senators at the time all pushed to get things done in these areas. And because we had a track record of doing things and being successful at it, that really helped us out. But I think what we did started the ball rolling for our competitors when it comes to coming into the area with more of the grants opportunities.
So you mentioned Columbus County government. What was county government's role? Was it them sort of adopting a resolution in support of a grant application, or was it more than that?
Yeah, initially it was basically getting resolutions, getting letters of support, doing things in the community. At some point, especially since COVID, there's been a couple grants through the state, the Great Grant Program, that they've had to use ARPA funds to get state funds, because the state legislators at the time, and they've changed the law now, but at the time they had to have money coming in from the county for the state to spend money. So the county also put up a couple $100,000 for one of our projects. But essentially it's the fact that they are able to show people that there's a need and speak to the people in Raleigh or Washington and make those decisions. But it's been nothing but a wonderful partnership with Columbus County. And even as people get elected or re-elected or move on, the board, Columbus County Commissioners, and that's one thing that I think Republicans and Democrats, one of the few things they agree on is that everybody needs high-speed internet. When it comes to utilities, that's a universal need. So the county's been instrumental and very helpful in what we've been able to do.
Do you think now that people do associate high-speed internet as being a vital utility?
Yep. I think it's more or as important as water, sewer, electricity. Obviously, people take every one of those things for granted. When you move into an area, you know, I live where I live today simply because I could get high-speed internet at the time we were looking to buy or build a house when we first got married. I literally would not look at places that didn't have high-speed internet, and that was 25, 26 years ago, and high-speed back then was DSL. So it's been really important for us to be able to get out, and the high-speed internet that's available out there now is, like I said, it's second to none when you're really looking across other networks or other providers. And I think it's something that Columbus County should be proud of, the citizens should be proud of, because these grant funds didn't come from the government. They came from our tax dollars. So the people in Columbus County paid for these projects along with FOCUS Broadband. So it's something that we should all be proud of.
So I think everybody associates FOCUS Broadband with Brunswick County. You know, folks in Columbus County, if we drive down to Charlotte, we see the big office there on 130. But I mean, it's really expanded out, right? I mean, I think earlier you mentioned the network going all the way to Hoke County. Can you describe kind of what the footprint is now and what was the idea behind that?
Well, up until 2010, there were some changes made in Raleigh where you could apply for a statewide franchise. Up until that time, there were some legal questions about whether a cooperative like us, even Brunswick Electric, could go outside of their original territory, the area that the state said this is where you have to serve. And so when those changes were made on the state level, then we started looking for opportunities to expand. And Columbus County was our first and only choice at the time, simply because our neighbors, our employees, everybody from Columbus County crosses that river. Like you said, goes to the beach, does whatever. So Columbus County became the epicenter, because once we were able to get outside of Columbus County, then people from Robinson County started calling, people from Hoke County, Scotland County, Pender County, Duplin County, on up into Perquimans and Chowan. Every one of those opportunities came about because they were speaking to somebody in the Columbus County or the Brunswick County area saying, you probably want to talk to this company because they're successful at doing what, able to get grant funds and expand into areas that really no other for-profit companies even care about. Even with the grant funds became, you know, billions of dollars during COVID, there was still a lot of counties that were ignored that had nobody interested in doing anything. But Columbus County started in 2010, and then we've moved over into Hoke and Scotland. I think we serve around 10 or 11 counties now. You know, have well over 100,000 what we call lines of business or customers. So we're one of the largest cooperatives in the entire country when it comes to internet.
So, you know, sometimes I think when we talk about utilities, we think about the actual physical infrastructure, the pipes or the cable or whatever. But I mean, really, it's making an important impact on people's lives, right? And the fact that you live here in Columbus County, has it been rewarding for you to actually see the difference it makes for people to have reliable, high-speed internet?
Yes, sir. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I get a lot of calls kind of as a forward-facing or public-facing employee when it comes to projects and town meetings and county meetings. I go to all these and speak. So I get a ton of calls, and I have a lot of relationships with people that invite me to their house to eat, to fish fry, whatever, because they say, Kris, we have a problem in this community, or my daughter, she can't finish up her school, or she can't go to work, she can't do things. You know, there's just untold stories like that where, because of who we are and how we operate, I've been able to go in and get people not by myself, but get people service. And it is important because I live in Columbus County, originally from the Bladen County area, but I live in Columbus County and have for 27 years. I want everybody here to have the same opportunities as any other location. And what you do with those opportunities is the difference in how you end up in life. But I really think having the internet there where people can work from home, people can run businesses from home, people can watch your videos and read your newspaper online, that makes a difference because, you know, there's good and bad to social media and having internet access, but it's literally the number one utility, at least in my mind, because you wouldn't go live in a house that had everything but internet service. Nobody, I think, would, especially if you have children or you have business or you have any type of connections to the outside world. Some people may actually say that they don't want to be bothered by the outside world, but you go somewhere without Wi-Fi, your kids are going to tell you pretty quick, it's time to leave. Or mine will, and they're grown.
So speaking of that, in terms of housing, you know, Columbus County, there's been discussions about new housing developments in the southern part of the county. We're already seeing some of that, and you know, now there's been some discussion about the eastern part. How does that fit into FOCUS's plan for Columbus County?
So what we do in those areas that where these projects that are either currently being built or being proposed are areas where we already have service because they were originally in grant areas or areas that we expanded to. We work closely with Brunswick Electric or Progress, and most of these it's going to be Brunswick Electric in a joint trench. So when that neighborhood starts to being developed and they finish with the water and sewer utilities, then the power and the internet comes next. So we work very closely. Every one of those projects, every one of those builders that are doing those projects are people we have relationship with because of stuff in Brunswick or Pender County. So we're going to expand into every one of those areas that have fiber optics. I would not be surprised if some of our competitors didn't do the same because some of these projects are pretty large when it comes to number of total units. To me, as a Columbus County taxpayer, I think it's extremely exciting to see controlled and managed growth simply because of tax rates and things. Everybody wants more and everything costs more. Every day it gets more expensive, but nobody wants to pay any more taxes. So there's only two ways to not pay more taxes: get more businesses and get more rooftops. And the only way we're going to do that is for these developers to come in and find affordable projects and build those up. I think it's inevitable, and I think you're going to see more of it, you know, whether some of these projects actually happen or not, but the projects that are moving along near the state line, I think people are going to like what they see when they get done with those areas. Completely different than what Columbus County development looks like now, but you know, those are the things, and those people are moving to this area from outside this area. They're bringing expertise from if they're retired or if they're still working. More than likely they're going to bring their family down when they come or bring their neighbors down from these neighborhoods they're moving from. So I think it's exciting because I've seen that growth in Brunswick County in my 22 years down there, and it makes a difference when you go to a high school or a park and you see the type of money that's available when Brunswick County's tax base is so much better and more mature than Columbus is at this time. So I think it's a good thing for everybody as long as it's done in an efficient and effective manner.
Kris, anything else that I haven't asked you that you want to address?
No, I do want to tell you that we appreciate this opportunity. We feel like FOCUS Broadband is the largest provider in Columbus County. I went back and looked at some of the numbers. I know you read some of them and updated. We have over 7,200 customer accounts in Columbus County. We serve or have the ability to serve over 10,800, 11,000 addresses. So that makes us one of the largest, if not the very largest provider, and we want to be seen as a local provider. I live in Columbus County. We probably have another 50, 60 employees that live over here. We have a location behind Brunswick Electric. Columbus County is a home for us, just like Brunswick County. And at some point, you know, we're involved in schools, the ball teams, and those things. We just want to be seen as a good corporate partner for Columbus County and let people know that we're here to stay. And because we're here to stay, you're going to have the best technology for internet service available.
Kris Ward, Director of Business Development for FOCUS Broadband, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. You can find past episodes of On the Record right now on our website, nrcolumbus.com.